Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And this week, we are diving into Manhattan Project's Volume 2 by Jonathan Hickman and Nick Pitarra, and colored by Jordie Bellaire.
Jordie Bellaire, yeah.
Yeah. Which I will say, I wasn't able to detect exactly when the shift happened, even, aside from reading the front cover of the issue. Mm-hmm. But it does feel like the color usage and kind of vocabulary of color in the series has blossomed a little bit more with her on colors.
I think I agree with that. I think they've set out a pretty specific kind of I was going to say like guidelines, but like in terms of what's colored when, like there's obviously there's always intentionality when you color a comic, but I think they've kind of fallen into some motifs. So you have a very quick visual idea of when and where you are, especially when we're talking about multiple versions of different characters. I think they found a rhythm for their and a rubric almost like for their coloring. And I think it helps if you have someone as good as Jordie Bellaire is, but knowing that she's now like the colorist going forward, that we're not going to be, we found a permanent colorist. You can go back to those things and it helps the book that way. And I think given the story that Hickman and Pitarra are telling, and the way they're telling it, and there is kind of a manic frenziness to it. There's kind of an insanity to it. It helps to have some of those visual cues there that you can only do with color. That it wouldn't come across just in black and white in inks, Right. And so having that extra hand there, I'm sure allows them to really flex.
Oppenheimer's issue is in particular. I'm like, my God.
I think we'll get to that one there because that is the end of this volume. That was issue 10. I think there's all kinds of the blue and red stuff happening here. But when there's a page that is only using literally two colors, mm-hmm. and is still differentiating depth and things like that using color, because they're like she was using shading within those reds and blues that I don't know that still made the image entirely discernible, because Nick sometimes uses a lot of detail on like a big splash page, and then sometimes with panels it's just a head talking with a blank background, because I think he understands the like a certain efficiency necessary for writing an ongoing series. But I also think, I was looking at I'm reading the individual issues, and I could not help but notice a letter from Jonathan Hickman explaining the delays in the schedule. And we're not that far into the series. Yeah. And I'm like, man, if you're getting backlogged now, and back then you might have thought, well, maybe this is only a 12 or 15 issue series or something like that. But me knowing how long it's going to go, it's not great to be in like issue 7 being like, so we're about 10 weeks behind right now. But that would come to be a Jonathan Hickman trope. Well, it always is. I mean, you go on one. Well, yeah, I mean, but some creators get more leeway than others. But this is earlier ish in his career, or at least the first part of his career. But he had time at Marvel, and it's a different beast when it's your own thing versus for hire work. But I mean, you can go on to like League of Comic Geeks with both you and I use, and you can pull up Manhattan Projects and you look at the issues, and you can look at those release dates, and you're like, okay, comes out here, and there's a gap there, there's a little bit of a gap there, there's a bit, you can kind of see when things are coming out and start seeing where some of the delays might have been. And it's always a thing too, where
the writer will always be like, yo, man, this is my bad, lay on a script. And then an artist often be like, yeah, I had to take a break. It was on me. So most teams are loath to throw either one of the team on the bus. They're always willing to take the blame, be like, no, this is not on. This is me. I'm slow with the scripts, like yada yada yada. But yeah, I think knowing that this book does make it a 25 and then ultimately 29, because the volume 6 is 4 more issues. Yeah. So knowing that it runs that long, and would have bet dollars to donuts that Hickman would have been behind very, very early. Because that is just where he falls. And I think he's a little better at it now, because I think as he's a little more established, there's a level of writing scripts, like getting things completed before the series starts, or having more completed.
Yeah, I mean, not to the Jeff Lemire extreme, I wouldn't think, but
no, and not to the Tom King extreme, where when he does miniseries, he has every script complete and hands it to the artist. Like, I don't think he goes that far either. But I do think that there's more flexibility built into the schedule now than maybe Jonathan Hickman 10, 15-ish years ago.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into this volume, because I mean, I have thoughts on it. Obviously, there's just a lot to unpack here, but I struggle not knowing what the overarching narrative is, like what we're aiming for, what's good, what's bad, blah, blah, blah. And, I think for this one, I've just decided, like, I'm just going to let it wash over me. It's like, see where it takes me, understand that, it's going to be a crazy story. Like, there's just no question about that. So it opens in a familiar space. It's a scene we've already seen before, but from the other character's vantage point.
Yes.
Which is a little, I don't think this is why he did it, but it was a little encouraging to me to be like, okay, he's not just throwing crazy stuff at the wall. He is working through a story. Like, we visited this, he laid the track for this, and he's now picking back up on it later. But if I had to say the central plot line of here is, you get a little bit of a redirect, because first you think you're getting, like, here's how the Russians had their Manhattan projects, blah, 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 blah. But really, this is about what it takes to create a global cabal that runs the world. And the naivete of saying, oh, we've got this nuclear arsenal now, so we're going to run this cabal, and we're going to have our own government within the government. We're not going to be accountable to anyone. We're going to do this. And the assumption was there's not currently a cabal in power that would stand in our way for this. So it's like, no. That seat is taken. You have to dethrone someone. You can't just ascend to a vacant throne, running the world secretly behind curtains and, Oval Office orgies and all the other stuff. So, like, then it kind of gets into the conspiratorial, not just the sci-fi.
Yeah.
But that was my central plot line of volume 2, was like, what does it take to, like, you and your friends get together and want to form a cabal that runs the world behind the scenes? This is what it takes.
Well, and I think what's interesting about this volume is it plays into kind of both sides of the conspiracy theory of who runs the world.
Yes.
It's the idea is, yes, there is what we'll call the political side, which they refer here more like the magical side, the mysticism side, right?
Yeah.
So it is kind of this mysticism versus science, but this idea that, all the people in power, the people who actually run the world, there is this weird cabal that runs the world. And the folks that are advancing science, like the technology people, you know what? They're doing that too. And the idea that the Manhattan projects and Los Alamos, like, they would go behind the backs of their governments over to Star City, right? This idea that we know that we're all on opposite sides here, but we're like-minded in that we're all scientists here. So if we create a backdoor to keep these lines of communications open, we can run the world now. So the idea of people behind the scenes, what machinations they have, simply because they are motivated by quote unquote discovery and research and things like that. But ultimately, the end goal is we want to run the world. But that is as much of a conspiracy belief as the shadowy cabal of politicians in power. Right, is the people behind science, and at least in our world now, we'll just call it tech, right?
Yes, right.
That can be a stand-in for the discovery of nuclear energy and things like that. That's happening in this book. This idea that those people secretly run the world outside of the bounds of geographical governments and countries. And so it was fun to see in this volume, to throw all of that in there and literally have them go to war against each other.
Yeah, I mean, and it, because then I thought, so what I keep making the mistake of, which I promise I'm not going to do next volume, I was like, oh, I see. So like the rest of this book will be about how they're trying to run their secret government while there's actually already a secret government, and it's going to be like this Civil War thing. It's like, no, that's the rest of the volume.
Yeah, that
maybe
that's
the
4
issue.
out of the 5 issues,
right?
Because the 5th issue is the Oppenheimer issue. Yeah, so
which is its own Civil War. Yeah,
which if we're talking about through lines, that's not obviously a narrative through line per se. You can see how it would fall into one, but it's obvious. I think it's clear that because we start volume 1, issue 1 is about Oppenheimer, and it's infinite Oppenheimers, right? And then here, issue 10, and we've seen flashes of the various Oppenheimers, right? And we know that this is it was like finite Oppenheimers, part 1 or whatever. So at least from a character standpoint, that the literal battle going on in his head, the literal war that's happening there, it's fair to say that's going to be a through line, and how that affects Oppenheimer going forward. Now you're right, that is the narrative through line. There isn't one story beat that's going all the way through. I think it's notable that, we talked last week that our narrator and effectively our main point of view character wasn't Oppenheimer, it was Fenneman, right?
Right.
It was the young guy, the kind of the pure optimist. We're reading his journals. He gets him and they got to get sidelined here, and because we're spending so much time over in the Soviet Union in Star City, we don't get a whole lot with some of the characters that we spent a lot of time with in the first volume. And I think I don't think it's a matter of them like, oh, we wanted to expand the world out and bring in all these new characters. I think for them, it's just, I get the sense that they very much view this book like an anthology, even though it's not solely totally an anthology. I think they view it in like, well, we can always come back to this being the stuff we started with, but we want to show these other sides of it. And in the end, we only have a few characters remaining from those that were introduced in the Soviet Union. Our cast of characters, our character page, only adds 4 new people, one of them being a dog. I find it funny though, that a consistent through line in just about any fictionalized retelling of the space race is that Laika speaks.
Yeah.
Like across any story is that, the dog we sent to space. Yeah. That's the actual genius, like that it doesn't matter who's writing the story from what view, like that is a consistent, well, it's not a zag at this point. That's like the way you go, is that the dog we set in space, that's the actual cosmonaut. That's the actual genius. That's the actual one that knows what's going on. I find that amusing.
It's great. It's, it's Cosmo, the Astro, what's the Marvel one?
Oh yeah, Cosmo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great trope, and you have to tip your hat to it every time you walk around it.
Yeah.
But was it in this book that someone was pointing out how insane it actually was that we figured out how to split the atom and create something X many times brighter than the sun before we figured out how to like exit the ground of our, like we didn't exit our atmosphere. I thought that was fascinating. It sounded like maybe that was an Oppenheimer rant at one point.
I
can't remember whose it was, but it was really good because I was like, oh yeah, that is pretty insane.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a huge explosion that it takes to get you out of the atmosphere. It takes a ton of fuel and everything else.
Yeah.
But less than a nuclear blast.
Yeah. Well, and it's also directional. And it's also like, I'm sure long before we sent things into space, we sent humans into space, we figured out how to get things into space, you know?
That's true. Yeah.
So there are other factors there, but you're totally right. There is an idea about that. And I think a lot of that too goes back to, and again, I'm not gonna sit here and try to redeem or cape for someone like Werner von Braun or even the other German scientists we're introduced to here, Helmut Gottrup, who again, another real person, worked with von Braun over in Germany and did end up working air quotes for the Soviet Union on their program as well. But the idea that those guys started what they did because they wanted to go into space, and then you get co-opted, however you want to define getting co-opted, into making rockets for war. That is just, as far as we know, historical record. So those guys were working on trying to get to space, right? That was the goal. And the U.S. was as well, but war effort comes in, and now we're using this technology to make rockets. And then after the fact, when that's done, okay, now we can go into space, which is kind of where we end up here now, right at the end of this volume with Kennedy. I'm not super like, I can't list you all the presidents in order, but like one thing I'm fairly certain of is FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, because like I kind of know that. And so we see Truman get eaten, I guess, by our Oppenheimer. And then it was like 6 months later, whatever it is, or something like that, the time jump was, and Kennedy's in office. So we've just we've skipped Ike. Again,
yes. Because I think that would have been Red Scare stuff, which doesn't really fit into this. But as you pointed out,
that's solid. I didn't even think about that. That actually makes sense. Yeah. Again, not that they have to.
Well, but with the anthology of it all, there's nothing to stop them from going back to that decade in volume 4 and saying, oh, by the way, this is going to pay off in the conclusion. So now you get to hear about the Ike administration, but we didn't want to lose the momentum of here's what the science culture looks like in the US. Here's what the science culture looks like in Russia. And here's what it looks like when they try to come together as a global.
Well, okay. But that's the thing though, like after Oppenheimer eats Truman, like the next page, it says 6 months later.
It's just no normal way to say that sentence.
Yeah. But the time jump is 6 months later.
I guess
so. It isn't like 6 years.
He never became president.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the idea that they're playing fast and loose with the history, I don't care about that. I just think it's interesting that they have jumped directly into Kennedy and into the space race, which does make sense for what they've seemingly set up here, because they've still found a way to set up the U.S. versus the Soviet Union, right, on this different level now. From a research and development standpoint.
There's got to be some shenanigan going on here because, I guess perhaps they're saying, like, Roosevelt got into office because he was a World War II general, right? Like that's like what I remember from AP US history was like,
no,
Americans.
Eisenhower.
Right.
Yeah.
Eisenhower. Yes. No, but that's what I meant. Eisenhower. Yes. Eisenhower got in because he was
he was Supreme Commander of the ETO,
of Allied forces or the U.S. or whatever. And that's not the first time that's happened, that we have a war and we promote the general to president. From the very, very beginning, that's what we've done. So I guess what they're saying is, like, with the Manhattan Projects really being the one running the country, winning the war, etc., perhaps Eisenhower didn't have as big of a spotlight and never became president of this universe. However, if they're saying, Eisenhower became president in 1953, in reality, and you just skip that, and Kennedy becomes president in 1953. Again, this is a really pedantic detail. Kennedy would not have been old enough yet to assume office, because he died at 43 in the second or third year of his term. And you subtract those 2 years, so he's 41, then you subtract another 8, and it's like, he's not 35.
If they're following that same timeline, he's basically in office almost 10 years, about a decade early.
Right.
Now, again, they're not putting hard dates on that, and none of that actually matters. I just do think
it absolutely does not matter, because I was like, among other things, it would be that easy to be like, oh, well, John F. Kennedy in our world was born 10 years earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, shut up. Let me tell the story.
But the only thing that I'm notable about is because they heavily imply that Fenneman and the Manhattan Projects had influence on Kennedy's on his speech, right? This idea of we choose to go to the moon, not because it's hard, do it by the end of the decade, right? Okay, but now what decade are we talking about? If he's in office in the 50s versus in office in the 60s. Again, none of this stuff actually matters. I do love probably it may be my favorite line in this volume. After they finish off their big battle, right? And you find out that we do see the evils of AI.
Oh,
right?
My gosh, that was so prescient.
Yeah, that the idea that what we saw in volume 1 of AI FDR was, I'm assuming, kind of an act, right? The idea that it's a bit doddering and connected, but the idea of, Von Braun does, this crazy move, and he has like 3 of his limbs. Well, I guess 2 of his limbs, because one of his arms is already gone. But when he wakes up and Fenneman is like fixing him up there, right? And they're trying to, he's getting filled in. Von Braun is getting filled in on what's happened here. Like, there's a new president, like, and things like that. And Von Braun has this idea. It's like, wait, so we now have unlimited funding to try and discover how to do things we've already discovered how to do. Venom is like, yep, isn't it great? Isn't it, we got a blank check now. Now we're basically we're like covertly authorized to do everything that we've been doing for the past X amount of years. And I find that so funny in terms of how this book can then go forward, right? This idea of the presumption now, at least to me, is now that they have their Kennedy in office, right? Now we're definitely going into space, further into space, for real space, right? We're proving we're going public that we're going into space, which means the Manhattan Projects privately are going to be doing something even further. That's right. kind of what I see. And again, it goes back in my mind to this anthology nature of, you can now jump around. We know that aliens exist. We've seen them. We fought them. We saw Enrico Fermi, who and whatever Fermi is, turn into almost like a brood type thing from the X-Men, and then transform back. Right. So we know there are these things that that happens and there's no explanation, which is fantastic. They're getting fired on. He's like, just wait 1 second. He transforms. He rips these guys, literally rips them apart, transforms back. They're like, yeah, we good? And it's like, yeah, I guess we are. Okay. Through the portal. We're done. Don't come back to it. Don't mention it again. It's like everyone already knows this thing except the reader. And I think it just shows it. I talked about there's a frenzy to this book, right? There's a manicness to this book. And I think I think it's super fun that way, that you don't know literally page to page what you're going to see, what's going to happen. Even if you know all the history, because once again, all these characters are real historical people.
Right.
And just because you know what the history says, they have the freedom now. Like they're so far off the rails, but they're still on a track. The track is just hidden. They're not flying through the air randomly. You just don't know where it's going. And it's such a joy. I think the way you said at the beginning, this idea of like, you just kind of got to accept it and let it wash over you.
Yeah. You are on a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where
it's in the dark.
You're so that's a
it's
good
completely
one.
pitch black.
I was like, you're seated all the way in the back and you're climbing a big hill. And you hear the screams of the people ahead of you, but you have no idea what's coming next.
Yeah.
But in the roller coaster in the dark, is phenomenal, especially when you've never been on before. Like,
oh yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I was on certain roller coasters so many times that my body already knew like every twist and turn.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to, oh God, the one at I was going to call it Paramount's Kings Island, just Kings Island.
Yeah.
That is like, there are two rides that when you've been standing in lines all day, you just go make up for lost time by hitting these on repeat. Adventure Express and Twin Racer. There's never lines.
Oh yeah, well, because the racer's been there a billion years.
I don't care. It's like a great little pick me up at the end of the day. Like the day that there's a roller coaster I went with my friends in 6th grade. The new one out was the indoor one that was like 30 seconds.
Is that Outer Limits? I think
it was Outer Limits.
It was, yeah.
We stood in line in July in Cincinnati for 6 hours because he could not be reasoned with. Of like, hey, it's going to be here forever. And we could have been on every other ride.
At least the rest of the summer,
Right. At least the rest of the summer. And I suspect the demand will be lower in August. But, that was my mistake. I'm like, I think I just wanted to, go to a park and ride some rides. Didn't really care what. I went with a roller coaster enthusiast. And I was like, never again.
Well, if you're doing that, you definitely don't want to go on Outer Limits, because that Outer Limits was, at the time it was a big deal, but but yeah, there is that you do have to surrender something there when you on a ride like that, even if you've been on before, because the whole idea is that feeling of weightlessness, right? The sensation of the speed and how you're moving and all that. And I do think this book in particular lends itself to that, because right, if you just have the conversation that we had about Truman, Eisenhower, and JFK, like if you have that conversation in earnest about this book, you have completely missed the concept of this book. Yeah. Like I think it's fun for us to talk about because we are pedantic in that way, and it's interesting. And I'm not saying there isn't a reason for it. And you're right. They could always jump back to it. Maybe in this world, Eisenhower is president later, maybe Eisenhower, so
the order.
Yeah. There are potential narrative reasons for why you might do that. But in the moment, none of that actually matters. You don't actually have to care about that. It's about taking everything you see in this book at face value. And I think that's the way it's just meant to be taken in. Just like whatever the next absurd thing is, you have to accept that, because in 2 pages, there's a very good chance that something even more absurd is going to happen that will make you look back on the thing you thought was absurd and be like, that was actually kind of normal, because this next thing we're at. And so they keep ramping it up, and it's not just ramping up, because you can't always be going up. Right? Because if you do that, then nothing matters. They find ways to go sideways too. So, you're pulled in all directions. You're like, there are times you're reading this volume where I'm thinking like, I know Hickman, right? I've read Hickman stuff. And when I first read this book, and it's being like, how does anyone's brain work this way?
I have been asking that repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I obviously, Jonathan Hickman, you're welcome to come on the podcast, talk to us anytime you want. But I really want to know, like, was Nick struggling to understand what even the assignment was here, which I think would be a perfectly reasonable question to say, hey, on this page you have this, and this happening. What the hell? Like what what does that mean? What does that look like? I would just anytime something incredibly odd or subtle, like anything over the top or anything subtle, I always want a glimpse at the script just to know, like, okay, what did the artist have to work with?
Like how much detail, how much description.
Because sometimes there are really subtle pages, not in this book, but in other books, there'll be really subtle pages where it's like a big splash page and it's like someone glancing over their shoulder, but it's a really meaningful look.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, how did you communicate? Like, we're going to spend 1/12 of this issue communicating one look, and it's totally going to work. Just high level of trust in the artist. And then other things here, like if I could read one script out of this book, it would be the Finite Oppenheimers. It's like, yeah, so they're like, he's sitting on a pyramid. There's a throne there. There's obviously an Oppenheimer, dressed like this and dressed like that, and two of them are making out, and there's this, and this, and it's like, what in the world? Where is this going, my guy?
Since you mentioned,
which again, as the artist, I would have to say that because you have to be at least invested enough to like be drawing this stuff.
Oh yeah,
as a reader, I'm just like, sure, like, yep, sign me up for more.
Since you mentioned that issue, the Finite Oppenheimers, which is issue 10, the last issue in this volume, we should mention Ryan Browne, who came in as a guest artist.
Yes,
for that issue. And it is funny. We mentioned Ryan. We mentioned his name in the Zero because we knew that he had issues coming up. And if you want more of Ryan Browne, definitely check out every book he's ever done with Charles Soule. 8 Billion Genies, Curse Words, Lucky Devils. He's phenomenal. But we were talking about Pitarra and his style and how it is in the same school of someone like Daniel Warren Johnson or Riley Rossmo or something like that. We failed to mention Ryan Browne in terms of people that have similar, I think very specifically in the way they draw faces and facial expressions, and a little bit about how they draw body type too, because they're not like, especially someone like Oppenheimer, the way that Pitarra draws Oppenheimer in that it's just incredibly thin and lithe, right? In an almost kind of unnatural way. Proportions look like they're almost right, but maybe like 2% off, in terms of like where joints are and things like that. And I'm
going to retcon our decision not to cover it, whether it was an oversight or decision, but just to say, had you added Ryan Browne to that list at the time, I would have been like, I don't know if he's really the same archetype. But now hearing, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, when I picture Ryan Browne now, the first image that comes to mind is the genie.
Well, and the genie, but
the genie is distinctly non-Nick Pitarra. But then I had to put it back in context of the whole series. Think of
all the characters. Think of all the people in 8 Billion Genies and the way that he draws characters. I think there is, again, it's not about that they're the exact same, but when you start from the larger tree of comic artists, like they're on the same branch. I think I used it in terms of like taxonomy, like they're in the same like genus or family, right? Not the same species, maybe not that far down, but they're somewhere up there. They're on the same side of the table. And I think if you didn't know that Ryan Browne had come in and did that issue 10, I don't know if you would have known if they hadn't said it. I think there is enough.
I think it's a little like, once you can see the distinctions. But
what I'm saying is,
I don't think you would have been like, what happened here?
Yeah, that issue is frantically. That issue is so different in the idea of, oh, well, we're just spending this issue inside Oppenheimer's head. It's a bunch of different Oppenheimers that you could almost convince yourself, well, naturally in that way, you can change the art style a little bit because we're not in the story as it was in the world, we're in his head. So if you didn't know that it was a guest artist coming in, regardless of who the guest artist is, I think you could easily not be fooled, but you could go through it and not have anything jarring of, oh, right, why is this one so different? Now, this is a situation, I think we've talked about this when comics use this construction in this way, right? Where the last issue of an arc or of a volume or something like that is unrelated to the story, right?
Right.
The idea you bring in a guest artist or you're using that issue to set up something else. You know, the playing a long game with that. It's a very common thing to do. And obviously the real world explanation obviously is like, sometimes you got to give our artist a break. And so every 5th or 6th issue, you have a guest artist because, hey, we're all friends here.
It's a bullpen game, right?
Yeah. And you can disguise that by being like, in this case, well, not only we bring in a guest artist, but we'll give the guest artist a specific storyline, something that they can do periodically. So we have breaks built in, right? So, you know, I think we talked about this with Letter 44 did this recently. Time for Time did this relatively recently when we discussed those. This idea of this interstitial that
I mean, the Unwritten did it every time, but I think that was always Mike Carey and Peter Gross.
I think like they
were doing it for story reasons.
Yes, yeah. And here you can do it for story reasons. You can do it for both reasons.
Sure.
I think, but what I'm getting at here is this is a scenario where they could have brought any artist in. They could have brought someone in with a completely different style. You know, they could have brought someone in it is blatantly obvious that we're bringing in a guest artist here. And I'm not saying they made a bad choice because I love Ryan Browne stuff here, but there are definitely cases where you're saying, okay, we have a guest artist in, we have this idea, we have this construction we want to go with these kind of end of arc issues, and so we're going to bring in someone completely different, maybe someone that Hickman knows, whose style is nothing like what Nick Pitarra has done. But I think instead what they've decided to do is, as we mentioned at the top, differentiate these issues using color and less spot style.
Right.
You know, they could have done it where Oppenheimer looks entirely different because you're drawing, someone has a more realistic, a more photorealistic style or a more cartoonish style. They could have gone that route. They didn't. Instead, what they've differentiated is by just going with this red and blue combination. And so, you know, right away, and again, they've been using that contrast throughout for various things with flashbacks and things like that. Like when the meeting between Star City and Los Alamos, that first meeting at that undisclosed bunk in Iceland, I think it was, they would use different, somewhere I think the Russians were in blue panels and the Americans were in red, and they'd done that for flashbacks. But here they set a very strict rule. Once we get into Oppenheimer's head, or we get into Joseph Oppenheimer's head, and we see that the one blue Oppenheimer is Robert Oppenheimer, the Oppenheimer that we think of, that was quote unquote in our world, right? The one that we think of, the one that you know Nolan made the movie out of. And this idea of committing so hard to that visual style leads to some really I think incredible storytelling that feels both completely separate from the rest of the story and also a piece of it, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's a specific red blue color convention they've used other places in the story, that doesn't appear off. However, the story that you're reading is connected to, well, I mean, it is connected, but like the setup, everything about it, even the visuals we see are so different than the rest of the book, but it doesn't feel out of place. And that, I mean, talking about like needles to thread, I think that one is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. My gosh. Yes. There's a lot of extremely fine execution that I think a casual reader, like if I had read this, I don't know, even 10 years ago when I was relatively new to comics, I think I would have aborted.
You would have bailed. Yeah.
I mean, especially if you were like, oh, this is cool artwork. Let me pick up issue 4 and just kind of flip through it in the comic shop. Just be like, what in the world is going on? Like, it's a huge cast, which is normally a turnoff for me. I can't really explain why it isn't in this book, other than I don't care about any characters and I'm not supposed to.
And I think that's something we talked about last week, right? This idea that it's not that the characters are wallpaper, but I think because there is no main narrative through line that says you have to follow this, you have to pay attention to this, that the characters all come in and out. I think maybe what your brain is saying is like, you don't have to remember any of these people, just know them visually. And they've obviously done that. We talked about it last week, right? That a lot of characters, but everyone is drawn in such a specific way that you don't even if you don't remember all their names, you know who they are. Oh, it's that guy and that guy.
It's the guy who did this thing last time. And there is a handy reference page each issue.
There is that is there. But I think the fact that you don't care about any of them, that none of them
is a strength of this book.
Yeah. None of them are quote unquote good people, right? They're not trying to be good people. All these people are terrible, right? All of them are bad. They're all willingly working and moving towards this end of what is effectively world domination or galaxy domination, right? So like none of these are good people. And so I think there's a detachment there that allows you, again, as we said, it allows everything to just wash over you. So you don't have to feel, oh, I have to connect with 8 of these people because this is what the story is. And I'm invested in what they're doing. You don't really know what's happening because what they're doing is nebulous outside of, dominating everything.
Right.
So that's our narrative through line right now. So I think that's probably what's helping you not feel like you're overwhelmed by characters or feeling like you have to connect with them. Your brain knows you don't have to, so you can just keep reading.
Yeah. I think that's pretty squarely like on the nose there of like, this is what I kind of expect from someone if they're going to do a big ensemble like this. And I feel bad about it, but that is why I don't read large ensemble books. I don't read Avengers. I don't read X-Men. I don't read Justice League because I'm just like, especially in books like that where I am importing a lot of my caring about the characters from my other encounters with those characters. Here, I'm a clean slate and it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
which is very liberating.
I think you would have a difficult time reading something like Fables because Fables is,
which is interesting because that's an anthology, right?
It is an anthology, but like at some point you open those issues up or those trades up, and it's a double splash page, and it's a headshot, and it's like 24 characters of like who's who in Fabletown, and you genuinely get invested in all of these characters and you see them, they're all fully formed, like you go through journeys
and you're
them.
importing investment in them or interest in them from
depending on
the thing they come from.
You know Snow White or Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast, Pinocchio, these stories, absolutely. But that, like, when you talk about number of characters that are important and you need to pay attention to, like at some point it's got to be like in like the 36. It's like 30, 40 some odd characters. That one, I think
it's all about how it's handled, right? Because like this is that what I'm saying I don't like in especially a finite series book. A lot of casual fans complained about with like Avengers Infinity War. I mean, I remember like news headlines for like there are 67 recurring characters or whatever. I'm like, right, but like all of them are like everyone they used in that story was used meaningfully, and it was a way that was consistent with their character, and it felt like, obviously the bigger characters moved their character arc forward a lot further, but everyone moved their character arc forward a bit. And I feel like, in my times reading, X-Men, Justice League, Avengers, whatever, it has that Stan Lee illusion of change where it's like, here's just a bunch of people doing stuff, and there's really one main character of this issue, and they're the only one that anything meaningful happens to. So I'm like, I don't know. It's like there's some finer distinction there that I can't quite articulate, but like, I don't want you putting a bunch of characters in just to be wallpaper and surround the one main character, which I think that's what a lot of lesser writing does.
That makes sense. The idea that it's wasteful almost, that like either these characters are here for no reason, or these characters are here and there's not enough time to service all of them.
Well, and if they're not here, yes. And if they're not here and you're not going to service them, and they're essentially a background actor to fulfill one purpose, just don't bother naming them. Like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of, that does make a lot of sense, because that comes back into what we're reading in this book here, because you're right. They've named these characters, I think, because they feel like they have to, because they're starting at least from a base of reality. So like the fact that we've named someone like Enrico Fermi, but we've only seen him, he's probably been present in a panel in these 10 issues, like maybe 36 times, like on an actual panel.
Right.
And some of those he turned into some sort of alien monster and killed like 20 people. Right.
There's no way to know. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're doing that simply you're filling out the cast. I think probably because they know they'll get to that at some point. Right. But he serves a purpose now in in terms of just being there. But even in that, his presence is effectively as much as someone like Einstein or anyone else we've seen. They're just there doing the work. They're part of the tapestry, and no one is the main character. No one is a lesser character. They're just all there. It's almost like the idea that you're shifting into, we're just going to focus on over here now. And we know there's other stuff's going on, and that stuff is as important as what we're seeing, what we're focusing on, but that importance isn't super high. Right. Because you aren't invested in anything that's happening, because at least for me, I think part of the reason I'm not super, and this is a feature, not a bug, reason I'm not super invested in what is happening in the specifics is because it's so absurd.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
we're so far out of the realm of not just reality, but even just like it's curved so far beyond that I'm like, I can't predict what's going to happen. So thus I don't care what's going to happen. Thus I can accept anything that does happen.
That's right? Exactly the
anything they decide to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feature, not a bug. Because
so meaning if they had tried to hew a little closer to reality, I don't know if this book works as well. If they were like, I can't remember where I saw this. Maybe it might be behind the scenes stuff, but the movies, now you see me, right? Mm-hmm. The movies about magic. They were talking about this. Movie Jesse Eisenberg was talking about how they met with actual magicians and said, "Show us the cutting edge. Show us what the best is happening right now." And then they took that, and their writers saw that and said, "Okay, what's one step further?" So with the idea being that in our movie, we're going to show things that aren't possible, but we're going to go up to the limit. So show us the limit, and we will step it in our writer's room. We will take it one step beyond reality.
Because fans of magic are like squinting a little bit like, wait, I guess it's only a little bit further than what I've seen so-and-so do.
Which is part of the issue that movie runs into, because when they show actual close-up magic, actual things that they've done, and then the stuff that's just beyond, you're like, but wait a minute, hold on. Like, I can see parts of how that, you create a dissonance because you're so close to reality, even though their intention was to go beyond it. They're close enough that you're like, wait, how does if you can explain the first trick, which is an actual magic trick, but how do you explain the second one that isn't? That one you made up. So when you ride that line of we want to be close enough to reality to be believable, sometimes you make yourself unbelievable. And I think what Hickman and Pitarra have done here, they're like, nah, forget all that. Like there's science fiction, there's science fantasy, and there's like, then we're going to pull from the bucket of complete ridiculousness that at no point you're like, oh, I can see how they went from the atomic bomb to that. No, like they're just making stuff up.
That's not what we're doing here.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not trying to make it believable, right? They're not trying to say this is something that could have happened. We just didn't know about it. They're like, no. This is going to be silly. This is going to be silly. And the point is that it's going to be silly and you're going to buy it because it's silly. And I think that choice, like we said, absolutely helps this book. That choice is absolutely a feature. Because if they tried to do that, it is similar, I think, also to Manifest Destiny, right? It's not the untold story of Lewis and Clark. Like they're fighting giant monsters and beasts beyond, thinking. So it isn't like this was a cover up or anything like that. It's so far beyond the pale that I think it makes your brain easier, more receptive to the concepts.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm always surprised how much more currency certain stories have than I realized at the time. Lewis and Clark would be another one where it was like, I kind of vaguely remember hearing about that in history class, never really took a personal interest in it. And then you would read this book and you're like, well, clearly someone got a grown-up book version of it and got really interested in it and decided to tell a story around it. And I don't know if you have seen the clip that's out there right now from Larry David's new show where he's doing like sketches throughout American history.
I have not. I want to check that out though.
Okay. Yeah. It's him telling his wife that the president sent him on this. And she's like highly suspects that it's just a boys trip that George Washington has sanctioned. And she's like, and Seinfeld is playing, whoever David isn't. So it's Lewis and Clark being Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. She's like, I suppose on this trip there will be lots of fishing, and Jerry's like, oh, just for survival, just for like it's not going to be. It's so good. But I'm like, why is Lewis and Clark running through Larry David's head at this point in his life and career, other than it's just one of those stories?
Yeah.
And there is more Manhattan Project Oppenheimer stuff out there than I realized. Because it was just like, I think Oppenheimer had exactly the same amount of my attention span as Lewis and Clark did before the Nolan movie. And then after the Nolan movie, like once you see, it's like, oh, there are historians have been going ape on this since it happened.
And I think that is part of, I'm assuming that was probably part of some of Hickman and Pitarra's calculus when they started this book. Right. This idea that if you're in it, if you're a historian, U.S. historian, there's tons of stuff for this. Right. But in popular culture, in the mainstream understanding, I think I agree. I think Oppenheimer and Los Alamos and all that probably occupied, you're right, the same space as something like Lewis and Clark did. Right. In that it was a chapter you learned about in U.S. history in high school. That's about as far as we got with it, unless you were someone that was super interested in that, either American history or that specific time period. And so I think there was probably Hickman and Pitarra probably felt they had a freedom. And obviously, of course, anyone had this freedom, but they have this freedom to take this idea where they assume that everyone knows a little bit about it. And they all probably know the same little bit about it, right? They know the name, like they know the name Oppenheimer. They know that's where the bomb was built. They know that Einstein was involved or present or consultant, whatever. They know those names. But outside of that, I'm sure they felt like we have free range to do whatever we want, and even though they keep name checking in existing people, like again, everyone over on the Russian side, Like all those were real people. You can look them up. They have Wikipedia pages. You can see the things that they did in their life. They went out of their way to still name check and use real people, but like not beholden to anything about reality.
Journal articles.
Yeah.
Like journal entries, which are definitively part of the fictional canon now.
Exactly.
Like I remember in volume 1 being like, that could have been a real thing they said. And maybe it was like, here are the private paranoid thoughts that I found in the journals, and I'm writing fiction about them.
Yeah.
Like fiction, but now it's clearly referencing things that only happen in the comics.
Exactly. So yeah, they are putting all that effort into it, into a time and a specific event that, again, when this book came out, I don't think people knew anything about. And you're right. Even though American Prometheus, the book, had been out, not a lot of folks are picking up biographies, like doorstop biographies of someone like Robert Oppenheimer back in the day, until Christopher Nolan tells you to pick it up. You know,
right?
It's like not a lot of people are picking up a doorstop biography of Alexander Hamilton until Lin-Manuel Miranda tells you to pick it up. You know, and so so like you could have read American Prometheus and be like, oh, I'll read this new comic book by Jonathan Hickman, Nick Pitarra, and have more knowledge than the average person. But now going back to it again, having been more exposed to it thanks to Christopher Nolan's movie, it puts this sheen and this different lens on this book, which again I think is fascinating, and it, to me, makes it more interesting because I like having I'm going to say more. I like having like original source knowledge and then seeing how it's twisted and used for story purposes, which is why I'm always a book first, movie second person. Because I like to know how it started, and then I like to see how it was changed and adapted. You know, I don't like learning about it through the adaptation. Does that make sense?
I agree. Yeah.
And so having a better sense of the actual historical record of the Manhattan Projects and what happened at Los Alamos, everything around the atomic bomb and things like that, has helped me go back into this book now and see, oh, I can point out the things that are quote unquote real, and then enjoying to see how those spin out in whatever ridiculous ways that Hickman and Pitarra decide to spin them out. I get more enjoyment out of that. Versus like, because again, it's not about like comparing the two, right? Here's history, here's fiction. I just like having that base of knowledge of being more aware of the characters I'm reading, because they were actual people. I find that kind of enjoyment out of it. So I'm glad that I held off from reading this series for as long as I did, because I think I'm getting more enjoyment out of it now than I would have beforehand. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And like I've said many, many times, I'm really enjoying this book.
Yeah.
I would not have stuck with this early in my comic reading days or pre Nolan's Oppenheimer / I pregame every Oppenheimer or every Nolan thing I can with whatever he tells you to read. So, I was reading American Prometheus leading up to that, which seriously enhanced my enjoyment of Oppenheimer. Mm-hmm. And now I'm since first time since high school reading the Odyssey, but specifically the Emily Wilson translation,
the one that he mentioned. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So it's like, I want to get in his headspace as much as possible, in the same way. After Batman Begins or Dark Knight, whatever, I saw an interview and he was like, here are the 3 comics that I used as a reference point to build my kind of Nolan verse Batman. And I was like, well, I guess I'm reading comics now. Because it was and like, that's interesting because that was much earlier than me going into a comic shop, was me getting the trades for Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, and something else. So I guess that was technically truly my first comic reading experience, which might have been 2008.
Well, if it was Dark Knight, Dark Knight was
still a grown adult. But I mean, because he's talking in particular, I think for The Long Halloween, that was the third one he mentioned.
I do remember that. Yeah,
they're the rooftop shots of the 3 of them talking. Dennis,
Gordon,
and Batman, and he was like that. That's basically all he stole from Long Halloween was like
pretty
the
much
vibe between the three of them. But still, whether you're reading it for the vibe or for whatever, read Long Halloween. My gosh.
Yeah. I find it funny when you talk about how if you had read this as it was coming out, let's say at the time in 2012, 13, 14, something like that, and that this is when you would have bailed on. I can envision a conversation between you and I then.
At the shop,
when I'd be like, dude, you got to read this book. Be like, I started it. Like, no. Trust me. Like, you got to read this one. I can see myself trying to convince you, like, no. This is ridiculous and crazy, but like, you got to read this book. It's really out there. And you being like, I read the first trade, man. I don't know. It's not,
that's exactly how the conversation would have gone.
Yeah.
And I think the real thing, whether I would have admitted it or not, is like, I read so much stuff. I don't know, my Goodreads goal this year is 120 and I'm like 76% of the way through the goal. But even doing this podcast once a week, I have read 4 non-comic novels between recording episodes, and all of the current, I went to the comic shop this week, got my pool. So I've read the new Daredevil. I read a new this. I read a new this. I read a new this. And when I sat down with volume 2 of Manhattan Projects, I'm like, what was going on again? And this was like 5 days apart. And like people who go, it's that volume, which I think, you do that volume, but you just have an incredible partition in your mind. Whereas I do that volume, and when I'm only returning to something once a month, especially if it was 1 issue per month, that is just too slow of a drip for me for a story like this, because this is a complicated story.
It is.
There's no getting around that. It's like but the good news is the story doesn't really matter.
That's what I was going to say. In this case, you could pick up an issue
but it takes you how long to figure that out? Like a year?
Okay.
In real time, especially with the shipping delays.
That's true. As it was coming out, harder to do. I think it's easier now that it's in trade. You're like, wait, what happened at the end of volume 1? And it would take you a couple of seconds to be like, all right, doesn't actually matter what happened. I remember the scenario. I can jump back in. It is a different, that affects your reading much differently now that the series is complete and you have collected trades. You're right. Versus when a story is coming out and it's like 1 month, 6 month pin issues. Now it's 2.5 months. And you're like, wait a minute, that can be difficult for a story like this, where again, it's not a full anthology. Cause like I'm talking about here in this volume, the first, issues 6, 7, 8, and 9 are like a little mini arc.
Right.
Right. It's introducing the Russians in Star City, the covert meeting, and then the battle between Los Alamos and the Harry Truman and his cabal of mysticism, right? So even in that little 4 issues there, that's an arc, and you do, for that story reason, should read those in order. But that isn't super connected totally to what happened at the end of volume 1, other than that FDR is in some AI and Truman is president and he's kind of crazy, right? So there's loose connection, there's timeline connection, but there isn't narrative connection there. So they have some safeguards, and like I said, when it is single issue, that is a valid critique of a book like this, of if there are so many delays of maybe not remembering, but not knowing what you need to remember, right? Because when something like this is, when the overall narrative is real kind of loosey-goosey like that, they are picking and choosing each issue, each mini arc, what's going to be important here, what's going to be important then, right? Because like in this little volume, what was important? Obviously, Truman being president, FDR being an AI, that was important. What wasn't important is that Albert Einstein isn't Albert Einstein, it's Albrecht Einstein. Right? It's not important. There's no real follow-up on the fact that the Einstein in this world switched places with another Einstein. We see the gate, it's still there. Him and Fenneman are still using it, and they use it to eject one of Truman's cabal into space or whatever. But that specific detail of who that Einstein is, not important anymore, at least not important in this volume. And so that may have stuck with you in volume 1, but you get to volume 2 and it's just like, no, they're just working together now. They're going to the space station and doing, so it can be hard to know what to focus in on when there is a lack of focus in the storytelling. You are playing catch up at times. It is much easier to do it in this format now, right? When you have all the issues done, when you have the volumes out there.
And I'm sitting here holding all of it and I can flip backwards when I need to. Whereas,
yes,
I don't know. I assume you, like me, and I would assume most people, when you're reading an ongoing series like this, you get a new issue, you read it, you bag it, you board it, you put it back in the box.
Yep.
The next month you get the new one, you read it. And if you need to go reference something from 3 issues ago, it's like, technically, yeah, I could go dig through my box and find it and whatever. Yeah. But I just as soon grind it out and sit here and read it, try to figure it out.
100%. It depends on the series. And
but in trade, I got no problem flipping back because it's right there.
It's already in your hand. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's why I've gravitated a little more toward being a trade reader. Although there are just times when I'm so excited about a new story coming out that I have to have the single issue. Like the Stephanie Phillips Daredevil right now, I'm like almost tempted to be like reading it at red lights on the way home. I'm that giddy about what's happening in
and there are always things that are like that. Yeah, but there are always things that are like that. And I think a book like the Manhattan Projects, depending on what kind of reader you are, it's either perfect for a single issue or perfect for trade waiting. Because if you're someone that I already know that every issue is just going to be bananas, that I don't need to follow up, then I'll end up waiting and I'll pick up this new issue and only have like you said, just like power through it, have a vague sense of what's happening and know that whatever is going to be important, they're going to tell me in this issue what's going to be important, what I need to remember. That can be frustrating for some readers. And there are times when I'm frustrated at the story. I think it depends on the storytellers and what kind of story it is. But I think a book like this, because it is so far off the deep end, it can suit it. It can be approachable and readable by any type of reader, and they can find justification as for why they want to read it that way.
Yeah. By the way, like this is the last thing I have to say this week for the Jonathan Hickman, but the Jonathan Hickman writing of it all. But I think a great way to close too is, have you read his biography on the back of the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like someone else wrote it. Like, the visionary talent behind such works as Eisner nominated Nightly News, Transhuman, Pax Romana. He also plies his trade at Marvel, working on books like Fantastic Four and the Avengers. And then, paragraph break, his twin brother Mark won the gold in fencing at the 2012 Olympics.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good.
And Nick's, like, clearly, I think the Jonathan, because they're the same voice of, he's a native Texan, all around nice guy. As a senior in high school, he was kicked out of honors English, subsequently fell in love with comic illustration while doodling with his friends in new class. Sometimes it pays not to do your homework.
Yeah. It is. I can assume, I would assume that,
so I think the next step I need from Jonathan Hickman is for him to write himself in like a John Malkovich way, in like a being John Malkovich way, where it's finite, infinite Hickmans, and we just see what's going on in his head. Although, I think the collab there would need to be between him and Tom King, because like if there's ever been multiple personalities just battling each other in someone's head, that's a Tom King arc. It's just Tom King doesn't visualize it the same way Hickman does.
Well, Hickman does it literally in that way. Yeah.
Even though he's doing it literally, but it's really symbolic And
yeah, definitely.
And Tom King will do it symbolically and reveal it symbolically.
Yes, yeah. It is. As I said earlier, I have read enough Hickman to know not to be surprised by stuff in terms of how his brain works. But even reading something like this that is earlier in his career, that is before he wrote this, before a lot of the stuff I've read after, and to still be like, man, I don't understand how your brain gets to some of these spots. Like I don't understand where this comes from to decide this is the way this story is going to go. This is where this character is going to go. And to still be constantly surprised on a book that is built on not only not really just subverting expectations, just for doing something that almost seems like it was decided by throwing darts at a wall.
Yeah.
Like now we're doing this now, and have it all make sense, have it feel like controlled chaos. And I think that's what Hickman and Pitarra have done in this book here, is that it feels it is, again, it's out of control, but all part of some sort of plan. Like it's intentionally out of control. It's out of control in the right way. And you're like, how do they do that? How is this plotted? And from a 30,000 foot view, looking at this book, I marvel at it in terms of how they're able to present what they're doing and present this silliness. And from a reader standpoint, I'm like, I don't care. It's fun.
Yeah. 100%.
Like I can look at it from both ways. And I think that's really, really cool with this book.
All right. Well, do you have anything else on volume 2?
I don't. I think the one thing I'll say,
in the chamber for 3, 4, 5.
I will say the one thing I will say is you don't get them in the trades, but if you have them in a single issue or look them up online, we talked about it a little bit, but I think it's worth going and just looking at the designs that Hickman does for the covers and pinpointing them back to what happens in each issue in terms of what they're showing and what he's deciding to do. I think it's not relevant to the story, other than I think it's super interesting that he has taken the time to vary the covers enough, because they're all the same cover. It's very standard. It's very, but the simple design choices that he decides to put in there, I think are super interesting and super cool. Is that they're relevant to what happens in that issue, but you don't have to be paying attention to them. Because I don't believe, at least in you're not seeing those issues covers in the trade. I should know that as I'm reading the trades here. But I have been going back and looking at them like on Comic Geeks or whatever, because I want to see that. I think that's something worth noting. Just that little extra effort of tying the cover.
Even if you just go to League of Comic Geeks and pull up the Manhattan Project series, it is fascinating to watch. Like, this isn't a spoiler because I haven't read this far, but I was like, oh, I wonder what the Infinite, because I read it, but I just kind of flipped past the cover too quickly. I was like, I wonder what that Finite Oppenheimer's one is. And it's all of these concentric circles in different shades of red, except for one blue circle.
Yes.
And as you scroll up the page, you'll see another Finite Oppenheimer at issue 15, where now about a third of the circles are blue. Yeah. And then you look at issue 19, which is an issue earlier than you would expect it. And all the circles are blue except the title circle, which is still red.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so clearly if I wanted to just like stroll down memory lane and only read the Oppenheimer issues, you would read 1, 15, 19.
Exactly.
Or 1, 10, 15, 19. And you can tell that just from the covers.
And you get a sense, and again, spoiler or not, but you get a sense of, because I think it's clear at the end of issue 10, right? When Robert Oppenheimer, one blue Oppenheimer, is able to recruit one of the other constructs, right? The samurai one, because he turns blue as well. So I don't think it's a spoiler to say that's where this story is going, but you can see that in the covers. And the fact that they do that and take the time to do that, I think that's really fun. And I think it's fun that it's Hickman doing it. When we talked about it in the Nightly News and all the stuff that he's done, he has this, his design eye is very graphical. you know, in terms of how he's laying.
I mean, they almost
out.
look like data charts. It's like this is the beginning of a good slide deck.
It's data charts, it's minimalism, it's things like that. Yeah.
I would love it if he sent the script to Nick Pitarra and was like, just in case this isn't clear, here's the cover.
I mean, going off earlier, like one of the covers in, you know, it has the SS, right? Because we're in Germany, right? It has the hammer and sickle because we're in the SUSSR. So like he drops little things in there.
Well, and if you're like, which one did they drop the bomb in? It's like, issue 3, the one with the bomb. Yeah.
Like it's little things that are both subtle and obvious. And again, that level of care into the book, I think is really fun. And the fact that it's the writer doing that, you know, that Hickman has done his own stuff. He doesn't cartoon as much or really ever now at this point. But the fact that he gets to put his very specific and some would say idiosyncratic graphic eye in this book somehow, I think is really, really fun. And so that's something I like to track continue to track going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll pay more attention to it. And I also noticed that 15 goes back to Pitarra for the Finite Oppenheimers, but 19 goes back to Ryan Browne. So
yeah. So
we'll cover that when we get there.
Might be a scheduling thing. We'll see how that plays into. But yeah, so Ryan Browne will come back. You know, as they continue that Oppenheimer motif or storyline.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Please keep reading along. Manhattan Projects, issues 11 to 15, volume 3. Volume 3 is called Building. And very ominous cover for the trade where the guy that's just a brain is lurking, and it says Building. So incredibly dark omens circling now. So anyway, looking forward to it, and we will see you next week.
Peace.